Each week, you will go through a particular chapter in the book. You'll watch videos, you'll complete an assignment, and then you will also complete our labs. Now, the first thing I want to say about our labs is that I strongly suggest that you do the chapter lectures first, because the labs are going to reinforce some of the topics from the lecture. You will get the most out of these labs if you are already familiar with the topics in them. To find all of your lab materials, you are going to click on the Lab Materials tab on the left-hand side. There you will find the Lab Activities and Materials folder. That is where you're going to find all of your labs. We'll go there in just a minute. This interface might change just a little bit throughout the semester. If I have any particular announcements about our labs that I need to make sure you see, they'll be here, if not in the Announcements tab as well. Each week you will need to submit a pre-lab assignment along with your actual lab. Now, the intention of this is for you to complete this before you do the lab so that you are familiar with some of the key terms and processes. This biology department website is where you will find a link to Biology 100 Lab Manual. This is PDF form. The current manual that you're seeing here is Spring 2020. It may or may not be updated for the semester that you are in, but hopefully it will be current. So you can scroll down, you can print out the lab that you need. Let me go back up to Lab 1 here because we're going to be in the first week. So exercise 1, what is the process of science? We go through the process of science in Chapter 1, so you'll want to have watched that first. Then you are going to read through the introduction. It goes through and reinforces those steps that we talk about in the lecture. So essentially what we're going to be doing here, excuse me, I'm scrolling a little too fast, is making an experiment based on some observations. Now, we are going to be using some data collected from some fish, and that will be found a little bit later. We'll go over that. But you're going to read the background, and then you are going to make an observation. Now, the first thing you may notice is that this particular lab is different than the lab in the printed manual. So if you are not using the printed purchased manual for your semester, and it is not a fish lab, you need to let me know because we did have to change it for the virtual and the hybrid classes. So you'll read through exercise 1. It's going to tell you what you need to do. You need to make an observation based on the video that we provide. You need to ask a causal question about it, and all of the information for how to do this is found up in the introduction. So if you don't know how to do any of these steps, you need to go back to the introduction. Now, as I said, this particular lab is not set up for the current lab, so it might not make sense with what I'm saying. But you'll continue on, and then you're going to record everything in your pre-lab and in your summary sheet. So here we have the pre-lab. You would answer these questions before you complete the lab. And then we get to our summary sheet. So you're going to state your observations based on the video that you are given. You're going to state your causal question. This says list the hypotheses suggested by your class, but you are doing this online. So you're going to make a list of your hypotheses, and then you're going to go through and answer questions about your experiment. Again, if you don't know what these things are, control group, control variables, uncontrolled variables, you're going to need to go back to the introduction or possibly back to your lecture material, which is why I want you to go through the lecture material first. So you're going to be, for this particular lab, you're going to be doing an experiment with fish. So this actually is not set up for fish. It's okay. We have this graph here. And then once you're finished with the fish part of the experiment, you're going to go down to the application questions. These are going to be questions based on the experiment that you just did. So we're trying to work through the scientific process here. You'll continue answer these questions, and then once you are finished, you will go through, follow these lab submission instructions to make a PDF out of your lab and then submit it. So let's go over to the lab activities and walk through lab 1 just a little bit. So you will need your lab manual. Hopefully you have the printed one by the time you start to do this. You will read through the instructions in your lab manual, just like we had over here. Read everything, work through the data. So for this particular lab, you'll have a couple of different resources. One is the fish video that goes along with our current lab. You'll use this to help make your observations and collect data for your fish experiment. And then so once we get there, I'm not going to actually play it. Sorry for that. I tried to stop it before the music starts. But this is just a little video about fish respiration. Then we also have a file of lab data that you'll need to use. So you will have your fish's data. You'll add it to this chart. You can copy this chart into your lab data sheet, into your manual, and then you will need to redo your averages. And then follow the instructions in your lab manual for whatever analysis you need to do of that lab data. There's also a video on making the graph for this lab. And so everything that you need for lab 1 should be available here. Finally, when you are done with your lab, you will need to come back to these instructions, these lab submission instructions, and follow them to correctly upload your lab. So you will need to download one of these apps here, Scannable, CamScanner, GeniusScan, or use your iPhone notes, or there's possibly a native app in your Android phones that allow you to take a picture of your lab and make a single PDF out of multiple pictures of your lab. So please use the instructions here, create a PDF either by using one of those apps or by using a desktop scanner. And then for the lab that you're on, you'll go to that lab submission button and upload, browse your phone or your computer wherever you are and upload your assignment. Now you can do this by using your phone camera and just uploading through your Blackboard app or Blackboard through your phone browser and upload it directly from there. You don't need to use your laptop unless you want to use a desktop scanner. Just like your assignments, and probably even more important because it's a bigger file, once you click submit, wait a minute, make sure that it is fully submitted, because quite often students will click submit and then they are like, oh man, I'm done, and they close out of Blackboard, and then it doesn't actually submit because it hasn't had time to upload, and then it becomes a partial submission that I cannot grade, and it won't necessarily let you back in to upload another one. So make sure that it has fully submitted. If it has not, you need to make sure that you attempt to resubmit through the same submission tab before your lab due date. If you have any questions with your lab, please feel free to let me know. So let's go back to lab activities and materials and just click on a couple other labs. Lab number 5, all we have is data. Sometimes there'll be a video. If we go down to lab 11, there's this folder with support information, several videos on how to do different steps in the lab. So it really just depends on the lab, but make sure you are utilizing the material from that you are given in this tab for each of your labs.